Joining me today is Ali Crooks, who's been a successful financial trader for over 15 years. Ali, thanks so much for joining us today. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm 40 years old. I've been trading just over 15 years. I currently trade mainly the major Forex markets and some of the indices, so the DAX and the S&P.
And when did you first become interested in the markets?
God, it was about 20 years ago. I actually joined an investment club. It wasn't so much that I was interested in the markets. At that age, I was just looking for different ways to make money. So I had a business that I was running with somebody else, and it was everything. I was wanting to be into property, into trading, into business, into everything. And that sparked my interest. One of the guys that was part of the group was an Aussie guy. He'd been a truck driver for 15 years and taught himself to trade. And what I noticed in the investment group is we'd meet once a month every Sunday and spend 3 hours trying to make a decision on which one share we were going to buy, and didn't get anywhere. And I could see that Tim was very much like me. He was wanting to get on and get trading, and we got chatting. And I actually spent a day with him and learnt some of the things that he did. And that's really what sparked my desire. And then at that point, there wasn't any real way of learning. So I had to go over to the US and did a training course out in Las Vegas, and that's where it all started from, really.
So what was your first trade? How did you start trading?
I started trading options because the spread betting market was really in its infancy then. It almost didn't exist. So I was trading options, and greed got the better of me. I had £5,000, so I had some student loan, some money that I took off a credit card, basically all the things you shouldn't do, and within 3 weeks that was gone. So despite the fact that I'd had some education and got around somebody who traded, ultimately I hadn't learned or done anything consistently, and that really sent me away from trading. So if you'd met me at that point, I would have been the person that would have said to you, don't do it, it's risky, you'll lose your money, when actually it was the way that I had approached it that was risky, and I let my emotions get the better of me. So it was about another 2 years before I actually started looking at it again and learning to do it properly. And I can remember my first proper trade. It was on Qualcomm, and it was a covered call, and it netted me 14% in less than 2 weeks. Those days are gone on those types of trades. That can happen now and again, but consistently that doesn't happen. So yeah, that was when I started to do things properly, and it all went from there, really.
So how did you learn and educate yourself on trading?
I got around a couple of guys from the States at the time, and I learnt from their material, and at the time they had really like a chat room rather than a trading room. It was more of a chat room where you could speak to them online. So I learnt from them. I did some of my own research. Back then YouTube wasn't what it was, so you didn't have the bombarding of information on social media. So you had to go hunting. And then I found a style that worked for me. So I tried everything. I tried counter trend trading, I tried pivot trading, I tried trend trading, and eventually trend trading suited me from a day trading perspective. So I got my head down, and what I noticed about all the traders that were around me that were successful is that they owned their own strategy. They owned one element. Yes, they may have 2 or 3 things that they did, but there was one specific thing that they focused on, and they weren't concerned whether or not the trader next to them was doing the same thing or something different. It didn't shake them. They would stick to their own thing. And what I found was that I was good at assessing trends and good at following trends, but where I struggled initially was struggled at finding or sticking to a specific type of entry. So for me, I spent a lot of time refining how I would enter trades.
So how did you learn your current approach, and what is your current approach?
My current approach is, I'm primarily a day trader. So Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, that's when I tend to be in front of my screens. So I learnt it literally through a combination of different styles. So I was looking at price analysis initially, so breaking out of a consolidation on a lower time frame chart. And then I started using moving averages. I tried moving averages, I tried Fibonacci, Elliott wave, all these different tools. But for me, moving averages just made sense. I could see them easily. I could see a correlation that when a trend broke, certain moving averages would work in a certain way. And I was able to translate that to the higher time frame. So I might be looking for a trade on the 5-minute chart, but I would be able to look at the 60-minute chart and go, well, I can see a confluence between what is going on the higher time frame and what is going on the lower time frame, rather than having 6 or 7 different indicators and just getting lost. So what I was doing was trying to marry up what I was seeing on the 60 and the 4-hourly to the 5-minute chart. So that's how I just kept doing that and doing it. And then I found out about back testing, which I don't know if anyone else has talked about, but for me, it's very easy to have a concept or a tool or a strategy, but whether or not that strategy is going to work over the long haul, you need to go back and test it. So I started testing the process that I was using day to day, and then refined it even more.
Did you always plan to go into the financial industry?
No, this was never a plan. I was going to go into marketing. When I was at university, that's where I thought I was going to go, and I did my placement at Nike, guys who make...
My other half works for Nike.
Oh, wow. So I did my placement up in Sunderland, and whilst I had a great time for a year, I came away from it less enthused than I thought I would be. And then I started a business. So I went back to where I was living before I went to university, down in Amersham, and I started a business with a friend of mine, and he put the money and he put the capital behind it, and we were hiring out Land Rovers and 4-wheel drives, and really I was the sweat labour. So I was the guy delivering the vehicles, answering the phones, doing the sales. So I realised then that I had an entrepreneurial nature, but what happened was that business went very well. We sold that business, and I had a lump sum of money, but I also had a huge ego because I thought that I'd created this great business and we'd sold it on. But ironically, really, I hadn't done a huge amount of it. I'd only done 50% of the work. He was the one with the brains. So the business I went into in my second business, that failed miserably. So I almost went to trading as a result of wanting something that at that time I perceived I had control over. That I didn't have employees, didn't have the stress. I thought, this trading thing, it'd be great that I can just sit there without any stress. How naive I was. Sit there without any stress and just trade, and it just be me and the markets. So yeah, it wasn't really what I was intending to do. And I didn't have a love for it or a fascination from it. That all grew over time.
So how good or bad was your trading when you started doing
my trading, ironic, if you look at it from a win-loss perspective, so if you look at purely a win-loss ratio, it's not that different than when I started out. My win-loss ratio now it hovers around 60%, so I'm only winning 60% of the time on a good month. But the difference back then is my win-loss ratio was around 55%, but I was often losing more in terms of the amount than I was winning. So my winners were small, my losers were big. And once I got over that hurdle, then I had the revenge trading hurdle to get over. And that's something listeners may have experienced. So what would happen is I'd get onto a winning run, and then I'd have a couple of losing trades, and I would lose more and lose more and lose more because I was trying to get back the loss that I'd had that morning or that afternoon. So what happened was I was then doubling up, betting big. So if I was going in at 2 lots on a trade, I'd then be going in at 4 lots to try and make the money back. So I was making all of the classic mistakes, but without realising that I was doing it.
So how has your strategy changed now?
So in terms of how I trade, I've refined it more to, as a day trader, purely as a trend-based trader, whereas back then I was trying to trade with the trend and then trying to trade counter-trend. I was just trying to trade anything that moved. But from a risk management point of view, I won't enter a trade unless I can see potential of a greater amount of reward to risk. So I'm looking ideally for a minimum of 2 to 1 on any particular trade. So I want to be able to win twice as much as that I can get. That's my base level. Whereas before, all I was concerned about was whether or not the trade would win. So from a trade management point of view, that's probably the most significant thing. So I'm not winning 90% of the time. I've not suddenly become this guru that can know what's going to happen every single time. But what I'm doing is I'm running trades for a minimum of 2 to 1, and when the market's offering me the opportunity, I'm trying to run it further as well.